Can anyone tell me anything about this doll? I figure you guys are sort of experts when it comes to the unknown. So maybe you can tell me something about what's going on? Because I've pretty much run out of ideas. I'll just jump right in. It started a little over 2 months ago. I got a package in the mail with no return address. I didn't actually think you could do that. I figured USPS wouldn't deliver it if there wasn't a sender listed. But they did for whatever reason, and it was definitely for me, as it had my name on it. Anyway, I opened it and found a doll. It was wrapped in a blue rag, a bunch of bubble wrap, and some paper towels, which made sense when I realized it was porcelain. It was also fairly large. The doll is just under 2 feet tall. As I took her out of her makeshift packaging, I saw that she was in fairly good condition. Her cloth body and her dress were both clean, although I don't think the dress is original to the doll. Her porcelain arms and legs were undamaged, her hair was intact and still styled in ringlets. There was a minor issue, a black mark on her chin, but I thought I could probably clean that up. The only weird thing, other than her unknown origins, of course, was that her eyes had been poked out. I realized that because whoever sent me the doll packed paper towel through her eyes. Once I pulled it out and picked the doll up, I could hear the rattling of the eyes inside the doll's head. Honestly, that was pretty creepy. But I've bought and owned damaged dolls before. The eyes sounded like they may still be intact, and I was pretty sure I could find a way to get them out of the head with a bit of Googling. I took her dress off to discover a white shift underneath. Beneath that, etched in the porcelain just below her neck, was the name Angie. At first, I figured my mom had sent me the doll, probably as a joke. She's one of the few people who has my address and sends me packages regularly. She knows how obsessed I am with dolls and how much I love horror. I figured she sent it to me as a prank. So, I took pictures of the doll as I was unwrapping it, intending to send them to her later. Here are the pictures I took. And here is a picture I took of her name. The first thing I did, of course, was message my mom about it. I was surprised when she had no idea what I was talking about. I know my mom pretty well. If she was the one who sent it, she would have owned up to the prank immediately. I ended up texting my sister, brother-in-law. None of them admitted to sending it. Maybe this wasn't my best idea ever, but I just kind of shrugged it off. I have plenty of friends who would love to play a creepy prank on me. I decided that I'd play it cool, and eventually whoever had done it would reveal themselves. In the meantime, I decided to set my doll on the shelf until I could figure out how to fix the issue with her eyes. I also did a little research on the doll. I found a date on her back that read 1975 and the number 2, as though this was the second doll made from whatever mold they used. But I couldn't find anything other than that. I still don't know who made the doll. Well, it didn't really matter. I don't worry too much about preserving the dolls I buy. I take them out of their boxes, I pose them and change their clothes, sometimes I brush their hair. That's why I call myself a casual collector. I was just happy to have a new doll to mess around with. Nothing strange happened at first. It wasn't until a few weeks after the package arrived that the first weird thing happened. I came home from work one night to find that Angie wasn't on the shelf where I'd left her. She'd been moved, so she was sitting in the doorway to my bedroom. I just about had a heart attack when I turned on the light and saw her sitting there. I took a picture as proof and sent it off to my roommates, assuming one of them had moved it to prank me. They all denied having moved it and accused me of messing with them. At this point, I was annoyed. I may love horror, but I don't believe in the supernatural, and I don't believe dolls can just get up and walk on their own. This joke had started out funny, but now it was just sort of pissing me off. Plus, whoever had gone in my room had opened my closet, which I always leave closed, and turned on the bathroom light, which I never leave on. It wasn't enough to move the doll, they had to mess with my other stuff, too. For a few days, everything was normal again. Angie stayed on her shelf like a proper lady, and I came home to a dark apartment every night. So far, so good. But then, one night, I started hearing a weird sound. It was a weird rattling sound. It wasn't very loud, but it was jarring in the quiet room. I switched on my light and saw Angie sitting on the floor by my bed, definitely not where I'd left her. I picked her up and heard the sound again. It was the sound of her eyes rattling around in her head. This was the first time I felt genuinely freaked out about the whole thing. I'm a light sleeper, there's no way someone could have gotten into my room and placed her beside me without waking her up. And there was nowhere they could be hiding. I searched my tiny room very thoroughly, I can assure you. My door was still locked, deadbolt, in fact, from the inside. I was so freaked out I didn't go back to bed the entire night and went to work exhausted the next morning. I had no idea what I was supposed to do. I know a lot of you believe in the supernatural, but I have lived my entire life as a skeptic. This thing rocked my worldview like you couldn't believe. Everything I knew about the paranormal and the occult was theoretical, things I referenced and read about to write scary stories. Nothing more. I started thinking about what I would do if I was in a horror movie. Get a priest to bless the doll? Could I find one to do that? I'm not Catholic, but would they do it anyway? Should I, go back to being Catholic? Would that help? And what if that didn't work? Would I have to find a medium or, I don't know, a demonologist or something? Is there a demon in the doll? Or is it haunted? Eventually, I decided that I just didn't want to deal with it anymore. I didn't want to throw the doll away because if I did, it could break, and if there was a demon trapped inside it, that might let it out. I'd just find someone to take it off my hands. Did you know you can sell haunted dolls on eBay? I can't imagine who on earth would buy them, but apparently there's some sort of market for it. I decided I'd put up a listing as soon as possible and then it wouldn't be my problem anymore. It took me a few days to put the listing up, however. I felt sort of guilty about it. I didn't want to shove the problem onto somebody else, even if they bought it fully expecting it to be haunted. Plus, I felt sort of attached to the doll. I really liked her, even though she was starting to creep me the fuck out. In the end, I never even got to put the listing up, because something else happened. I woke up one morning to find a paper stuffed in the doll's eyes. Here is what I found. The paper was graphing paper. It looks like it came from my old stats notebook. Written on the paper in purple marker was, yes or no. I was still terrified, don't get me wrong, but now I was also curious. And that's much more dangerous. Because I really wanted to know what the fuck is up with this doll. I decided to put off posting it on eBay. This here is the part where I think I may have fucked everything up beyond the point of no return. I decided to ask the doll a question. I felt kind of stupid, sitting there and talking to the doll, but I figured, hell, why not? I know now why you shouldn't do that, I'll get to that. I decided to ask it, are you dangerous? I left the paper sitting next to the doll and went to work. When I came home, I had my answer. The no on the paper had been circled. Pick. After that, I left the graphing paper and a marker next to the doll. Every morning, I would write yes or no on a fresh page, ask my question, and go to work. Here are the questions I asked and the answers I received. Do you want to hurt me? No. Do you want to hurt somebody? Yes. Do you want to hurt the person who poked out your eyes? Yes. Did someone send you here? No. Did you send yourself? Yes. Did you pick me for a reason? Yes. Can you tell me why? I didn't receive an answer to that last one. I tried asking a few more questions, but the doll stopped answering. In fact, all the weird stuff that had been happening stopped entirely. It was surreal and I started to wonder if I had imagined it all. Maybe I was having some psychotic break. Mental illness runs in our family. Or maybe it was carbon monoxide poisoning. Things were silent for a few weeks. Then, on April 1st, I saw this written on my bathroom mirror. Now I was more confused than ever. I started thinking that maybe this was some kind of April Fool's joke. But it had been going on for weeks, since early February, actually. And I couldn't come up with a way that someone might have managed to pull this off. I mean, if someone was sneaking into my room at night, into my apartment, surely I would have caught them at some point. Instead of making me feel better, the message on the mirror made me feel worse. I started thinking about putting the doll on eBay again. I once again interrogated my friends and roommates to see if someone was fucking with me. Then, this morning, I saw this. Whatever's going on, I don't think this is fucking funny anymore. I want it to stop. At this point, I'm convinced that the doll is doing this somehow. I've spent all morning doing research only to find that I may have seriously fucked up by communicating with it. I've opened a channel between us that, theoretically, could be exploited by whatever's inside the doll. If it's a demon or some other type of inhuman spirit, I could be seriously fucked. I think the doll was lying to me when I was asking it questions. I think it is dangerous and it wants something from me, but I also don't think it sent itself. It had to come from somewhere, right? The question is, where? And from whom? And why did they send it to me of all people? So I'm asking you guys for help, because you're all experts in this kind of thing. I want whatever's happening to stop. I write horror stories and watch horror movies, sure, but I don't have any interest in living them. If any of you have ever seen this doll before, if you have an idea of where it might come from or what I should do to make it stop, please tell me. I'm desperate at this point. The weird kid at school earned her reputation. Years ago, back in the days when my friend group was playing pitch and toss behind the bike sheds every lunch break, I met a weird girl who was lucky with coins. My pals warned me it'd be easier to just forfeit my money than challenge her, but she had nice blonde hair and torn fishnet stockings, so I said, let's go. She won, obviously. It cost me a few bucks, but I got her name, Kelly, and even made her giggle a few times. Wasn't long before we started dating. Those days, Kelly's parents weren't around much, so she fed herself with her winnings, and as she won more and more, people grumbled. They said Kelly was too lucky. Somebody even floated a rumor she used trick coins. Over the next few months, Kelly and I got serious. As she made more cash, she decided to upgrade her wardrobe and was soon rocking the full goth look. One of our teachers, real religious lady, spent more time on abstinence than arithmetic, threw a fit. She decided Kelly was a Satanist and told her to get out of the classroom. The two of them had it out right then and there. Kelly eventually said, "You'll be sorry," and got this dark look on her face. The teacher just pointed toward the door. Later, the principal got involved. Turned it into this whole thing. The school board tried to call Kelly's parents in, but they weren't about to race down for a meeting about their daughter's education. Hell, they didn't care whether she had food. A deal got worked out. Kelly could sit in with the year below us that period. Different teacher, one who didn't give a shit about goths. Everyone was happy. Until 5 days later. Our gang was chilling at the skate park when a guy from school ran up and said, "Did you hear? Religious teacher died in a car accident." 2 little kids saw the whole thing, although they were too young to understand what actually happened. They just said, "A lady flew through the air like Superman." Everyone got real quiet. A few people glanced at Kelly, then looked away all nervous. We stopped getting invited places after that. People started scribbling on her locker, whispering behind her back. There was talk her parents joined a weird cult back in the 80s, and our classmates agreed the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. One day Kelly was in the bathroom and this older girl, Sandra, started shit. She called Kelly a freak, pulled her hair, and bloodied her lip. Kelly gave Sandra this look, like she was staring a hole through her head. Like she was casting a spell, someone commented later. People asked Sandra whether she was scared Kelly might use witchcraft to get revenge. Sandra said no. Magic isn't real. Kelly's just a freak. But a few days later, Sandra's guts started to hurt. She went to the school nurse, who rushed her to hospital, where she underwent an emergency operation which the surgeon botched. One tiny mistake, a simple slip of the wrist, and Sandra never made it to prom. After that, nobody wrote on Kelly's locker. One evening, she broke down and said, "Those horrible things weren't my fault. I don't know magic or witchcraft or any of that stuff. I just get lucky sometimes." I bought a bouquet of Kelly's favorite flowers, posies, and told her I knew she wasn't to blame and that nothing had changed between us. We both said "I love you" for the first time and then kissed. Was a real sweet moment. A few years went by. We both graduated and moved away from our hometown to attend college. And all the while, we had these little blessings. 10 seconds after our car broke down on a cross-country road trip, a mechanic pulled up and fixed it on the spot, free of charge. Anytime we walked into a fancy restaurant, the host would say, "A table just opened up, come right this way." Shortly after graduation, Kelly gifted me an envelope. An early birthday present. There were 2 tickets to Vegas inside. We rolled into town and started with the slots, then we played craps, roulette, and blackjack. The chips piled up. We cashed out, checked into the luxury suite at a 5-star hotel, then went shopping. On day 2, Kelly was in a form-hugging red dress and diamond earrings. I was rocking a $5,000 suit. By the end of the night, we could barely carry our winnings. Kelly's luck afforded us a comfortable lifestyle and even paid for a fancy wedding which her parents skipped, but nevertheless, the good times rolled, and it felt like they'd never end. Until 5 years later, when they suddenly did. Kelly and I started getting into petty arguments. Those petty arguments soon escalated. We'd jump from "what should we watch on Netflix" to "when are we gonna start having kids," in less than 5 minutes. One afternoon, completely out of the blue, she demanded to see my phone, to see who I was secretly messaging. I promised she had nothing to worry about. She developed this nasty temper and started ordering me around, making me cancel plans last minute and nitpicking about the clothes I wore. I often found myself daydreaming about leaving. Things really spiraled out of control after I got a new coworker. She was my age, recently divorced, in terrific shape. You see where this is headed. One afternoon I left my phone behind, and wouldn't you know it, Kelly guessed my passcode on her first try. The second I walked through the door, she screamed loud enough to wake the dead. Kelly was pissed. I goofed up big time. She told me to leave and gave me the look. I practically skipped out the door, happy to put our festering carcass of a marriage behind me. Oh sure, it meant the end of all the little blessings I enjoyed while around Kelly, but that was a small price to pay for my freedom. My first night in a cheap motel, while I was lying in bed, a sewage pipe burst in the ceiling, causing chunky, gravy-colored water to spray over my face. On day 2, a crow crashed through the window, flopped around with one twisted wing, then died right on top of my left shoe. I began to suspect my string of bad luck wasn't a coincidence. I suddenly developed this cough, and then one morning I rolled out of bed and spat a thick rope of blood. Fuck. I rushed to hospital for scans and tests, then a doctor came in to break the grim news. It was cancer. I needed a risky operation, pronto. I asked the doctor what my odds of survival were. He sighed and said, 50-50. The operation got the go-ahead, but I had just enough time to settle my affairs. Needing all the good luck I could get, I rushed out to the florist, bought a bouquet of posies, and sat out in the rain waiting for Kelly. She pulled up in a silver Mercedes. Turns out, right around the time I was sitting in a hospital gown waiting for a scan, she'd entered a radio contest and won. At that moment, a light bulb went off. Kelly's good luck wasn't coincidence, she siphoned it. Throughout all the charmed years we'd spent together, we'd probably left a string of minor misfortune in our wake. And anybody who really pissed her off sure paid the price. I pictured a young Kelly arguing with her parents over bedtime, or whether she could have cookies for dinner. And after every temper tantrum, they'd stumble from one disaster into another. No wonder the pair of them cut ties with her. Now my good luck was gone. Evaporated. And I really, really needed it back. I got down on my knees, clasped my hands together, and said, "Babe, I want you back. I'm so sorry. I'm a stupid fucking asshole and you did absolutely nothing wrong. Please forgive me. I'll do anything." I buried my head in her waist and sobbed. Kelly folded her arms, tilted her head to the side, and got this look on her face, like she was mulling it over. The 13th Order. Do you know the legend of the 13th Order? The tale was as much a part of our small town as the ancient, towering oak in the square or the faded murals on Main Street. Yet no one truly believed it, at least not until the night I ventured into our local Burger King at the stroke of midnight. "Why are you open so late, Tony?" I asked, peering over the counter at the night shift worker who looked half asleep behind his headset. "We got 24/7 service, you know," he replied with a yawn. "What will it be, Jake?" A Whopper meal, please." As I waited for my order, I glanced at the digital screen displaying order numbers. I was order number 13. I laughed off the superstition and returned to the counter to collect my meal. "Here you go, Jake. The 13th order, on the dot of midnight." "Fancy that," Tony said with a chuckle, handing me the bag and an oddly oversized soda cup. As soon as I stepped out of the Burger King, a chill shot down my spine. The usual nighttime summer chorus of crickets seemed eerily silent. I shrugged off the uneasy feeling, blaming it on the late hour and the eeriness of the quiet street. But that night, I woke up to whispers in my ear. 2 Whoppers, large fries. They murmured, the voices seemingly coming from the shadows around me. The shadows looked wrong, as though they were moving, swirling, coiling around like smoke. The next day, I was followed by dark figures only visible from the corner of my eyes. They would vanish every time I tried to focus on them, but the whispers grew louder. The whispers of burger orders, chicken nuggets, and milkshakes became a maddening cacophony. I decided to return the untouched meal of shadows to Burger King, but as I approached, the fast food joint seemed to morph before my eyes, turning into a gothic, towering castle, the glowing sign now a haunting, ghostly glow in the midnight darkness. I cautiously pushed the heavy door open. The interior was not the familiar, bright fast food restaurant but a grand, dimly lit hall. Tony was at the counter, or what seemed to be him. His skin was pale as death, his eyes glowing an unnatural blue. "Jake," he murmured, his voice echoing around the grand hall. "You want to return your order?" "Yes, Tony," I replied, my voice trembling. I can't take the whispers, the shadows." A sigh escaped his lips, and he reached for the bag. The moment he took it from me, the castle faded, and I was standing back in the regular Burger King. Tony was back to his normal, bored, half-asleep self. "Thanks, Jake," he said. "We really gotta stop serving that 13th order. Those meal of shadows aren't worth the trouble." And just like that, everything went back to normal. But I still can't shake off the cold dread every time I pass by a Burger King, remembering the whispers from the shadows. I used to work the night shift at a Wendy's in my small town. It was always a rather peaceful job, with just a few late-night wanderers craving fast food. One night, everything changed. I was on my shift with my colleague, Jeremy. It was around 2 a.m., and as usual, it was dead quiet. Suddenly, an older man walked in, shivering from the rain. His clothes were tattered, his eyes obscured by a thick, wild mane of hair. Jeremy, who was at the counter, greeted him. "Hello, sir. What can I get you tonight?" The man replied with a gruff, almost inhuman voice, "Just a Frosty, thank you." Jeremy took his order and handed him the Frosty, but the man didn't move to sit down. He just stared at the frozen dessert. Suddenly, he looked up at Jeremy and said, "Tell Wendy. She should have stayed in the abyss." With that, he turned around and walked out. Jeremy and I exchanged confused looks, but brushed it off as just another late-night eccentric. Days later, I was on shift again with Jeremy. It was around the same time, and the man came back. Again, he ordered a Frosty. And again, he repeated the same cryptic message, "Tell Wendy. She should have stayed in the abyss." This time, we were seriously creeped out. A couple of weeks passed without the man reappearing. One day, however, I arrived for my shift to find Jeremy pale and terrified. "What happened?" I asked. "That guy. He was here again. But he didn't look human, man." He shivered as he recounted how the man's appearance had warped. His skin was gray and cracked, his eyes glowed in the dim light, and his voice. It sounded like a chorus of whispers. Jeremy claimed that the man repeated his message, but this time added, "The abyss awakens. Wendy. She brings it." The next few nights were a terrifying blur. We started noticing strange things. The lights would flicker, and we'd hear voices whispering the man's cryptic message. One night, while I was on shift alone, the man reappeared. His appearance was more monstrous than ever, his eyes seething with an unholy light. In a voice that sent shivers down my spine, he said, "The abyss is here." Suddenly, the lights went out completely. In the darkness, I heard what sounded like a soft, giggling voice. "Wendy's here," it said. When the lights flickered back on, standing in front of the counter was a small girl. She looked like the Wendy's logo, but her eyes were hollow, black voids. I stood frozen in terror as she opened her mouth, releasing a scream that sounded like a million souls crying in agony. After that, I don't remember much. I woke up in the hospital, with Jeremy by my side. He told me he had found me unconscious on the floor of the Wendy's. We never went back to that Wendy's again. It closed shortly after, and the building remains abandoned. I still don't know who or what that old man was, or what he meant by the abyss. And as for Wendy, I don't think I want to find out.